This conference will now be recorded.
And guys, even in the back, you're able to see my screen and hear my voice. Good, great. So before we go ahead and start with the topic today, let's address a couple of questions that people were asking yesterday out there. So one of the most popular question that I kind of get is that what are the contents that we're going to cover? Like, what is, let's say, the entire syllabus, to give an idea, and what are the contents inside that particular syllabus out there. Now, what I do to every session out there is that I rely upon what Microsoft kind of tells you. Like, if you want to be a DevOps engineer, let's understand what is the requirement what Microsoft is giving you. So, in order to be a DevOps engineer, Microsoft expects you to clear a certification called AZ400, which is Azure DevOps Engineer. Okay, so let's go here. Let's take that particular certification called AZ400. This is the exam. Let's go here. And in order for you to give this examination, there are some prerequisites. There are some requirements that you have to kind of cover. So let's go here, and it's telling the job role is a DevOps engineer. The prerequisites is one of these two certification options. Option one is either Microsoft is expecting you to come from an administration background, that you are an administrator, so that you are familiar with the DevOps practices. Option two is that you are a developer, developer working on .NET, Java, C Sharp, whatever it is. We are not taking the option two, we are taking the option one route, because we are not here for a development course. We are doing an administration course firstly. So the first course that I'll be covering is Microsoft Azure, or Microsoft Administrator Associate. It's an associate level program. And if you just scroll down and let's see, there is something called certification skill outline. I'll go here, and these are the contents that I'll be covering. So I am following what Microsoft is actually telling me. So if you look at it, RBACs is something that we were talking about. Subscription is something that we're talking about. Then we'll talk about something called storages. Then we'll talk about something called virtual machines. In this particular pattern, I'm going ahead and covering things out. So is it everything related to 104? Because if I cover everything related to 104, it will literally take like around 2 months to cover only this one. So not everything related to 104. The part which a DevOps engineer needs for from 104 out here. Like let's say storages, let's say virtual machines and all these concepts out here. But to give you an outline, this is going to be our first, let's say 35 to 40 day of journey. This is the, let's say, syllabus. I mean, this is, let's say, the syllabus for the first 35 to 40 days of our journey. How did I again get in here? Just type in AZ104. It'll give you something called Microsoft Azure Administrator. And there are no prerequisites for this particular course. And let's see, where is the examination? Okay. So here you have something called parts of requirement. There's no part of requirement out here. Just go ahead and download this particular skill outline. So this is first thing that we are going to look at in the first good 35 to 40 day of our journey. After this, we are going, or we will go into the actual syllabus, which is AZ400, which is our stack. And to explain your AZ400, I'll need either 204, which is development, or 104, which is administration. So I'm taking the administration route out here. And let's come here. Let's again see the part of the requirement out here. And let's come here and just say download the skill outline. And this will be the strategy for AZ400. Again, this keeps getting updated, so I follow very closely. I mean, I follow kind of this very closely. And it talks about something like site reliability engineering. It talks about something called CI/CD pipelines. It talks about all these things out here. So these two, meaning I combine a good amount of AZ104 plus almost everything in AZ400, and this is going to be our syllabus for the next 65-70 classes out here. So if you are asking about the syllabus, please go ahead and look at the certification pattern, because I'm not really creating my own syllabus out here. I'm just using what Microsoft is telling me to do. So if you are doing a Microsoft certification, meaning if you are becoming an engineer with Azure DevOps, you have to follow what Microsoft kind of tells you. So this is the expectation what Microsoft has, and this is what we are going to do over the next 65 classes out here. Does this answer your questions, guys, on what is the syllabus and where do you get the copy and all these things? If you want to get the copy, simple online. Just go there, AZ104 and a combination of AZ400. You'll get all this outline. This is what we're going to follow. Is any questions there, guys? And one more thing that I wanted to, let's say, just give you all a heads up is that every session is being recorded. But one thing that I want to give you all, let's say, a quick warning is that each and every recording that we do, we use this particular application called GoToMeeting and kind of record it out. And whatever we record it stays on this particular cloud that GoToMeeting offers. And that recording only stays there for 7 days. So make sure that each and every session you download it, keep it with you in your laptop so that you can use it for your future. Because after 7 days, you're not going to get that particular recording link. So please make sure that each and every day you download it. And what happens, just a second, I'll just come back. What happens is that over a period, you have so many classes to cover, right? Please make sure to name your classes according to the way it's done. Let's say we're talking about subscriptions. Say class one and then give it a name called subscriptions out here. So that when you revisit back, you know what is the lecture that you want to, let's say, do. Let's say if a part, let's say you are doing a virtual machine, you're not very strong there. You only want to clear that particular lecture. So you can just go back into that particular lecture and just listen to that, right? So make sure you have, let's say, a course content in that way. Make sure you do it right from the day one. Like, when we record a session, we send usually the recording by 2 3 or something. By the evening we just send it out. Please make sure to download it, keep it the day it's kind of released out there, because after 7 days you're not going to get that. So that's the reason I'm just giving you a quick heads up. Please make sure to download it so that you can use it for your future purposes out there. Yes, please go ahead. Azure 900, AZ 900 is a fundamental course. So if you say AZ 900 out here, it's called Microsoft Azure Fundamentals. And the reason I'm not going inside AZ 900 explicitly is because a very good part of AZ 900 gets covered in AZ 104. So AZ 104 has 90-95% overlap with 10, let's say 900 out here. So when you do AZ 104, it means that you're also doing AZ 900 out here. So AZ 900 is this particular fundamental course as such. Yes, any questions here, guys? Any questions with this? Anyone, any questions online, offline that I can take? And guys, one quick humble request is that yes, I'm able to see, great.
Yes.
If you have a question, please unmute yourself and talk it out, because I don't really see the chat window out here, so I might miss some questions out there. If anyone is following the chat, you can also just unmute and tell that what, there are a couple of questions and you can just ask me, or you can just unmute yourself and just ask the question out there.
Is this
Yes, any
AZ104 and AC400 is covered?
CI/CD is AZ400 only. CI/CD is covered in AZ400. CI/CD is DevOps. It's pure DevOps. AZ104 you cover administration. That how do you administer resources and all these things out. And until and unless you don't know what is administration, you cannot do DevOps. So both are very tightly coupled with each other. So that's the reason we are firstly following 104 and then we are jumping into 400 as such.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions, guys? No, I said we are covering AZ104 and 400. 400 comes after the first 35-40 days of your course. So we are doing DevOps, yes, but before I do DevOps, I need you to, let's say, or I need to cover 104. So we are doing a combination of both. Yes, any more questions here, guys? Certifications are mandatory? No, not really. In order to crack a job, you don't need a certification, let's say, to have in your bucket. If you have a certification, it's a career advantage. If you have a certification, it's just, let's say, for your internal growth and etc. But for securing a job, you don't need a certification. Yes, each and every certification is valid for a particular period of time. Like for example, this certificate called Azure Fundamental, it's a lifetime certification. You don't need to renew this out. AZ104 administration is valid for 2 years. 400 is valid for 2 years. There is a certification called security 500, which is valid for 1 year. So depending upon what certification you take, the validity period is also going to be there, and you need to renew your certifications after that's done. Take the exam, yes. You need to take an exam again. There are a few certifications which also requires you to give an interview with, let's say, Microsoft and etc. So you have different combinations of certifications as such. Okay. for your live projects, what happens is that when you do a certification, right, you kind of go through the entire course. You kind of do the you kind of do the course and all these things. So it will give you an inherent knowledge which you can apply to your project. So again, everything boils down to your basics. If you're strong with your basics, you can do anything on top of it. Some clients do have requirements that you need to be certified. So your company forces you to kind of take the certification and all these things. So yes, companies usually sponsors. They will also give you time. Yes, they'll also give you time. So company sponsors. Normally, when I hold around 9 to 10 certifications right now. Everything, I never spend a single penny out of my pocket. The company sponsors it out. So that's how we do the certifications out there. Even renewal also, company sponsors it because they need engineers to be certified out here. So again, a certification is not mandatory to crack a job, but if you want to get some knowledge, definitely go through the certification content. That is good enough out there. Any more questions here? Yeah. The certification, depending upon a certificate, for example, the fundamentals out here. Let's see. Again, it depends upon the certification. That's what I was telling you. Is that if you want to understand what is the cost that is associated with the certification, let's say 104. I'm going inside 104. Just scroll down the schedule exam. There's something called the cost. 165 USD, which is in US standard dollar, but you can just change this to, let's say, INR. Let's say India, 4,800 rupees in let's say Indian currency. This is if you clear it, yes, 2 years. You'll have a validity of 2 years out here. So in order to give this exam, you'll have to schedule it, pay for the examination if you are doing it on your own basis, schedule it out online, and then give the examination as such. Again, if anyone is interested in giving the examination, please let me know. I'll send you across some documentations that you can study so that you can kind of clear this certification out here. Yes, any more questions here, guys? Mm-hmm. PowerShell, ARM, Terraform, not even, I mean, we are covering a good amount of AZ104. I'm not telling everything related to AZ104 because AZ104 also expects you to have a very good command over Azure Active Directory, which is not required for a DevOps engineer. So that is the section that I'll be, kind of omitting out because I now need to be very selective on what we are covering and what we are not covering out here because we have a time that is, let's say, time bound, right? So that's something that I need to do. So we'll be covering a good amount of 104, a very good amount of 400, and also not what is there in 104 and 400, which is Terraform, Kubernetes, and all these things. Open source and something. This is additional, like add on top of the certification. So if you look at the entire course content, it is AZ 104 plus 400 plus open source, which is Terraform, Dockers, and all these things. Dockers, AKS, Kubernetes services, and all these things. So this is going to give you the entire content. Plus, we will have some live projects.
This Terraform, Docker and all, does it fall it in administrator or in DevOps?
I'm sorry, can you please come again?
Terraform, Docker and all,
Mhm.
do they fall in under administrator or DevOps?
Both. It does fall in both. It does have an overlap
Both.
at both, meaning it is primarily an administration tool. Terraform is primarily an
Okay.
administration tool, but you use it along with Azure DevOps. So as a DevOps
Okay.
engineer, we'll have to cover that particular part.
Okay.
So this is going to be the overview of what you're doing, live projects, and we have a lot of assignments that are not really kind of covered out here. So a lot of assignments, a lot of, let's say, requirements that I'll be giving over a period of time and all these things out there. So we will start with this particular, let's say, section called 104. That's going to be the agenda going forward. Any questions here, guys? Anyone? Any questions here? Not development, DevOps, administration and DevOps. Yes. Any questions, guys, that I can take? Mhm.
Yeah, Kiran, one thing.
Yeah, please.
In the offline classes, when they are asking the question, you're not able to hear. So while you are answering the question as well.
Your voice is too low. Can you please come again?
No, in offline, they when they ask the question, you're not able to hear. So while you are
Okay, I'll
answering
just
this,
repeat it. Yeah, I'll
question.
just repeat the question and then I'll kind of answer that out.
That will
That
be
kind of usually slips out of my mind because whenever someone asks a question, the immediate response is going to be an answer. So I'll just try to, let's say, reiterate the question and then give my answer out there.
thank you.
Okay, so coming back to our Azure portal, this is what we are talking yesterday. And this is where we started. Just to, let's say, do a quick recap. We were telling that whenever you create something, whenever you go to portal.azure.com and have an account with Azure, the first thing you get is a tenant ID. So Azure now identifies you with something known as a top level entity called tenant. So tenant becomes your parent. So under a tenant, you will have to create something called as a subscription with Azure. So that to use the services of Azure, you go ahead and create subscriptions of Azure. And one of the subscriptions that we were discussing yesterday, yeah, sorry, a little bit louder. Okay, sure. Uh, are you okay with that? Are you okay with my? Okay, great. So okay, fine. So that's what I was telling. Is that is it okay? Is this tone okay with you? Okay. So you create something known as an Azure subscription out here. And when you do an Azure subscription, Azure tells you that, you know what, offer different kinds of subscriptions. One of the very popular model is called free trail. The other is called pay as you go and etc. And we were doing a free trail subscription yesterday. So we are saying go into the subscription, let's say tab, and we were telling a new subscription. And we were giving details like what is the name, the email address, the credit card information, authenticating it out, and then getting a subscription which is valid for the first 30 days. So now you have two things out here. You have a subscription. So you have a tenant. Under a tenant, you have one particular subscription which is now called as a free trail subscription out here. Now, how does this really work? Meaning, how does Azure know that you are logging in? How does, let's say, Azure authenticate you? This is something that I actually want to get into. This is called authentication. Meaning, what is the authentication model Azure works in? And what does Azure Active Directory play a role? I mean, where does Azure Active Directory play a role out here? Well, let's see this. Let's take a very generic website, okay? Let's say facebook.com or something, some website that's available out there. So what you do normally is that you're a user, you come here, you use an internet, you come to the internet out here, visit this particular internet and go to a website called what? Facebook.com. You type in something called www.facebook.com. And what is the first page you usually see when you go into this particular website? You log in password. So this particular website or this particular browser takes me to that particular facebook.com website. And that particular website gives me a page wherein I can type in my credentials. I'm just talking about user ID and password as credentials out here. You type in user ID and password. Now Facebook has to authenticate you, right? It has to see whether the user ID and the password that you are providing, is that right? Is it matches with its records? So what happens is that Facebook goes into something like a backend database. They have something like a backend database where they hold all these credentials securely, and it verifies two things. First thing it's going to verify is that is the user with this particular ID, is he existing or not? Existing, yes. And let's see the password what the user has entered, is that right or not? It's right. Then what does this database tell you is that the database comes back with a reply telling that, you know what, yes, this is verified, and this will tell you to that Facebook server telling that, you know what, all his credentials are good, and the Facebook server in reply responds back to you with a page. So this is what is happening right now. So you are coming here as a user, hitting this particular website out here. This website is taking you to a page called facebook.com. Facebook.com is coming back to a database server, and that particular database is replying back again to Facebook telling that the credentials are good. It's again communicating back to your browser. Your browser is communicating back to you in the form of a page telling that this is your account, this is all your photos and all that stuff. Now let's imagine this. You are on facebook.com. You close your browser. Okay, I'm not telling you cleared your history. I'm telling you close your browser without logging out. The next time you go to facebook.com, do you again get a page called user ID and password? Do you get that, or do you directly get into it? Directly get into it. Now what happens out here is that when facebook.com responds back to your browser, facebook.com gives something called as a token. We call this as an authorization token. So there is something known as a token, nothing but a huge string, alphanumeric string out here, so that facebook.com can identify the browser, telling that this browser is authenticated already. You don't need to again go ahead and let's say do something like the user ID and password altogether. No, don't do that. And this token is given to your browser, right? Your browser has to store this token somewhere. Your browser will store this token into something known as a cache memory. Each and every browser, every system comes with something known as a cache memory out here. So this browser also has something known as a cache memory, wherein it stores this token. And after storing the token for the first time, it'll go ahead and do, let's say, it'll give you that page. The second time, when you hit this particular browser and go to facebook.com, facebook.com will not go to its database. It will come back to its cache memory and check whether the token is there or not. And since the token is already there, it'll go ahead and tell, okay, fine, the user is already authenticated. So I don't need to go ahead back into my backend database and all these things out. This is how generally websites work. Even portal.azure.com is a website wherein we are going ahead and logging things out. And portal.azure.com does something similar. And let's replace all these things out. Let's say it is www.portal.azure.com right now. And instead of a backend database, Azure doesn't go to a database. Azure goes to something called as the Active Directory, which is nothing but, let's say, in the olden days, we had something called the telephone yellow pages and all these things, wherein you had telephone numbers and all these things, addresses and all these things. This Azure Active Directory is called the identity provider to Azure, meaning all your subscriptions in Azure trust this particular directory. Meaning if this directory tells that the user is there, the subscription will tell, okay, fine, the user is allowed. So this is now called as an identity provider. So what I'm now telling is that if this user called xyz@gmail.com or xyz@microsoft.com, anything let's say gmail.com, if this user has to log into Azure, he has to be a part of the identity provider. He has to be a part, or he or she has to be a part of this particular identity provider called Azure Active Directory. And this user has to be registered with this particular identity provider so that you can log into Azure. So that's what Azure does when you create a subscription with it. Azure tells you that, you know what, you're now a user. I'll store you in this particular directory called Azure Active Directory as a user, and I'll also store your credentials. Same thing happens to Azure also. I'm a user, I'm going into my browser. Let's say this is a Chrome engine that I have, Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or Firefox or whatever browser that you can think of. I go to this particular website. This particular website goes back into its identity provider, which is Active Directory, and does a search for your name. Active Directory tells you that, you know what, the user has a name. Yes, he's registered. The password is also there. So let me come back to the browser and tell, yes, this user is authenticated. Portal.azure.com will send a token back to, let's say, your browser. The browser will now allow you. And the next time you log in, you don't need to have a token. But in case you clear your cache, you'll have to again log in. In case you, let's say, do clear your browsing history, you'll have to again re-log in out here. So the main thing that I want to now highlight is that if you want to log in onto my portal, let's say I have a company portal called Tata. Again, coming back to yesterday's example, Tata has a tenant. If you are an employee of Tata, you want to log into that particular, let's say, Tata subscription, you'll firstly have to be a part of this particular tenant out here, this particular tenant or this particular Active Directory out here. So let's look at that. So this now becomes one of the most crucial concepts, because if the user is not a part of it, then just forget about Azure portal. You cannot even log into Azure portal out here. So let me go here. So I am on the Azure subscription. You can either type Active Directory, you can say Active Directory, go here, or there are three dots here. You can click here and just scroll down and say something called Azure Active Directory. Anything works. Just type in do a directory, everything. Come here. And now it's telling a couple of informations that, you know what, your tenant ID and you have something called as a primary domain name. Now this is the ID with which I registered it, and I have a domain name out here. In the case of organizations, they will have their own domain names. Like as of now, I have a domain name called something dot on microsoft.com. In the case of an organizations, they go ahead and they have their own custom domain called microsoft.com or xyz.com, accenture.com, and etc. in place of this. And then I have something called as a licensing model. But very importantly, I have something known as users. All the users who can have access to my tenant. So let me go here and let me see. Now, there are a couple of users out here. And I'm using this particular ID called classes Azure DevOps. This is the ID using which I've logged in. And there is something called as a demo user, developer, and all these things out here. I'll just delete these two. So I'm just selecting these two. I can delete users out here. And I can also add users into my portal. Into my domain, I can also add users. Now I'm an administrator. You're a developer. You have joined my organization. I now come here and I say new user. You're a new user right now for me. And there are two things out here that you can do. You can either create a user, meaning you have, let's say, an ID called xyz@microsoft.com. You can create the user with that particular domain. As of now, my domain is something like this. For an organization, the domain will be @microsoft.com, and they go ahead and create a user out here. Or for our case, we can go ahead and invite a user, meaning I can go ahead give an email ID called xyz@gmail.com. I can have the user invited. I can do a user invitation. So let's do both. Let's invite the user and let's also try to add the user. Let's see what is the difference between both of them. So let's go here. Firstly, I'll go ahead and invite a user. I'll say this user is called as, let's say, a contributor. I'll go ahead give the user address. I have a Gmail ID called RBAC contributor @gmail.com. I'm just going ahead and adding some user, and it's asking me what is the first name, what is the last name, and etc. So I'll say it is RBAC, the first name, contributor, the last name. Not mandatory fields. These are not really mandatory fields, but just adding it for the sake of adding it out. And you can say what is the usage location, meaning in which location should the user come from. So there are a couple of things like the countries out here, and I can restrict telling that the user should only be from India. I can also do that. Again, optional, not mandatory. I'll just go ahead. Again, job title. This is again optional, not mandatory. I'll just go ahead and invite the user out here. So I'm sending an invitation to the user with an email ID called rbaccontributor@gmail.com. And this is telling, okay, fine, I successfully invited the user. Saying the user is invited, the user is enabled. He can now go ahead and access your Azure portal. So let me now log in as this user. Let me go ahead into my own Gmail account and let me see this. Let's just sign in, and let's sign in that as that particular user called RBAC contributor. Let's hope I remember this password. Let's see. And yeah, confirm. And let's go inside this particular email ID. Let's understand how the invitation really looks like. So do you see now you have a Microsoft invitation out here? And if I go here, it's telling, what, classes Azure DevOps has invited you to access their application with their organization. Meaning your organization has now invited you. If you want to accept this invitation, please go ahead, click on this accept invitation button. I'll say accept invitation out here. And this will now, it will take me to a different page asking me to sign into my account. So it's telling this is your account using which you're signing in, and go ahead, give your password. I'll give an initial password out here and I'll attempt to sign in. So I'll say, yes, I want to, let's say, be signed in. And now it's telling me that, what, you are accessing the data of an organization. We have some terms and conditions. Do you want to accept this? I'll say, yes, I accept this out. And I will now go into the portal.azure.com out here. So I am now another user, which is logging with my own personal account. And I'm logging into this particular Azure subscription out here. And yeah, it now take two apps and all these things out, but let me go directly into portal.azure.com. and I am inside the portal.azure.com with altogether a different, let's say, account, but I have logged in to the same tenant. If I go here, 27DE, something like this. If I come here and see the default directory, 27DE, but here is my here is my administrator account, which is classes Azure DevOps. Now I have logged into the same account as a different user, which is RBAC at the rate something like this. This is how you go ahead and invite a user. We'll also talk about what do you get when you add a user, how do you add a user and all. We'll talk about that. But here's the catch. This is what I want you all to focus on, is that there are two different users logged into the same tenant at the same time right now. One is called classes Azure DevOps. It's classes Azure DevOps at the rate gmail.com, using which I went ahead and logged in, and this is my administrator account. Let me expand this a little further. Come on. So this is my admin account. I am logged into a tenant with an ID called 2D, something like this, same tenant out here. And I have access to the subscription under the same tenant. Meaning I have, because if I go here, if I click on home, if I say subscriptions, I'm able to see a subscription with this ID. Meaning it's telling me that yes, you have a subscription, you can start working with Azure. Now this user here, who's called as rbac@gmail.com. Let's say rbac@gmail.com out here. I added him just now to my tenant. Now the question is that, will he be able to access the subscription? Yes, no, maybe. There are two levels of entities, what I'm talking about. One is the tenant. So I have a user at the tenant. So that's the reason the user is able to even log in. And the second level entity is the subscription. The question now is that, will this user, will he be able to go ahead and look into my subscription?
No,
Purely based on
no.
admin. But in this scenario,
Only if the role is
mhm,
assigned, then he can see.
only the role is assigned. So in this case, let's see that. Let's go to that particular user who's now, let's say, a contributor. Let's go into the subscriptions. Don't have any subscriptions. You will not have access to the subscriptions if you do not have a proper role there. That's what, or that brings me back to yesterday's concept of roles, wherein I have added a user in my tenant, but now I get to decide which subscription should I add him to. This is how I separate users. That I don't add, meaning if you add a user at the tenant level, it doesn't mean that the user will inherit all the permissions here on the subscription level. You cannot do that. That's where administrators get to choose what is the subscription I want to add a user to. Meaning a user is from Tata Motors, I don't want to add him to a Tata Steel subscription. This is how I now control it. So what do I do here? How do I give this particular person an access? Is by using a concept called role based access control, RBAC. It's called RBAC's RBACs, or the full form is role based access control. And in general, I'm talking about just generally out here, Azure gives you three broad classifications of the roles. The classifications are owner, WNER, owner or administrator, contributor, and finally something called as a reader. I can now choose to add, let's say, my resources, my developers, my QAs, and I can assign them one of these roles over the subscription. This is what now I'm talking about, is that the role assignment is done on a subscription, not a tenant. In the tenant, you just add a user so that the user can log in. But that doesn't mean that the user will have access to the subscription. The user will have access to the subscription only when I give him one of the roles out here. But what does this do? What does this really give me out here is that let's understand these roles and then go ahead and add a user to the role out here. So owner, contributor, and a reader. The owner is an administrator for a particular subscription. If you have an owner role, you can invite other users, meaning add users, delete users, modify the properties of the user, meaning the company name, the password, and all these things. Or you can modify the property of a user if you are an owner. Apart from this, you also have a full control over the resources of Azure. Meaning, when I'm talking about resources of Azure, I'm talking about virtual machines, data, and all these things out. So you can create, delete, modify the resources as well. If you are, let's say, an owner role, I mean, if you have this particular role called an owner role. But here's the point. I don't want everyone to be an owner of my subscription. No, because I will not have any control of who's getting added, who's getting, let's say, removed and everything. So it'll be very dangerous for me. That's the reason Azure is giving you one more role called contributor. So what a contributor can do is that the contributor can do everything an owner can do apart from adding or deleting users. User management is not available for a contributor role. Finally, you have a reader role, which is just reading your subscription, meaning which is just seeing what is there inside your portal. That's it. He doesn't have any other role apart from that. Let's say this is just a reader, no permissions, nothing. He can just see the permissions, he can just read the permissions. And why do you need this role? Who do you assign this role? Is that, let's say I'm Tata, right? I'm, let's say, taking that particular example called Tata. I have a lot of users, let's say, using my subscription. Over a period of time, I'm getting some bill, I'm getting some amount getting generated, right? This has to be audited because each and everything that I pay is audited properly. Who audits it? An external auditor, because my company cannot audit its own self. I need an external auditor, and that auditor needs to look, what am I doing here? How is the bill getting generated? This auditor, who's a chartered accountant usually, is not technically sound. He doesn't want to go ahead and play with the resources. Just he wants to just see what are the resources and see what is the billing. He can be a reader to your subscription. So this is where owner, usually very limited people have the role called owner, like your project administrators and all these things. They have a role called owners. Usually we, as, let's say, DevOps engineers or developers and everything, we fall under this particular category called contributor, wherein apart from doing a user management, you can do everything else that an owner can do. So then how do you assign this role? How do you, sorry? A reader is something, yes, like monitoring. He can just see, that's it. He cannot do anything. So it's something like monitoring, yes. Yes, correct. They'll just have access to read your subscription, meaning what is there, what is the data. They'll just able to see that. That's it. They won't be able to do anything. They won't be able to change anything of that. Neither they will be able to add any other user. Yeah, no user management. Like this is no user management. So it is no user management. Apart from that, everything else what an owner can do. Any questions till here, guys? Then the point is that I have a user who's added at the tenant level. This is a user that I have. Let's say cancel. Let's come back here. This is a user who's called as a contributor right now for me. He is added at this particular tenant. He's just a user at the tenant level. He's not added to my subscription. I have not given him an access to the subscription. Now I'd like to go ahead and add him to the subscription as a contributor, not an owner, but a contributor. Let's see how that works. I'll come here and I want to add him where? On the subscription. So I'll go into my subscription as an administrator. This is my administration account. I'm clicking on the subscription called Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. And there are a lot of options in the left hand side of this. These options are called as blades in Azure. BLADES. We call them as not options but blades in Azure. That's the technical terminology what we say. So overview is called a blade, activity log is called a blade, and all these things. I'm interested in one of the blade called access control. in brackets IAM, identity and access management. Let's go here and let's say add. It says, okay, fine, you want to do an add. Yes, I say yes, I want to do an addition, and I want to add a role assignment, meaning I want to give a user a particular role, a particular RBAC, so that he can access my subscription. And I'll say add. It's asking me what is the role that you want to give. You see owner, contributor, reader, three broad classifications. Apart from this, you also have so many things out here. Each and every role has some description out here, meaning if you want to do specific resource, meaning a user only needs access to a specific resource, I can also give him using this particular role as such. So let's come back here and let's do a contributor, and all the way to the top I'll say contributor. Click on this, I'll say next. It's now asking user group service principal, which is the user you want to assign this particular role. I'll say select members. This is the role, this is the user that I had. I'll select this user, sorry, I'll select this user and I'll say select, and I'll say review and assign. This is the first thing that I'm doing, and I'll say review, assign, review this one. And now it's adding a role. The first thing that I did, I added the user. Now I'm giving him a role. Until and unless a user has a role, he won't be able to go ahead and use my resources in Azure. Now the role assignment is done, and in order for this role assignment to get reflected, it takes somewhere around 2 to 3 minutes. For the user to get reflected, it will take somewhere around 2 to 3 minutes. Sometime I will also have to log out and log in back again. So I'll just refresh my screen. Do you see now I see something called as Visual Studio Enterprise subscription? And this is me logging in as a contributor, not as an administrator. And if you look at this, I have a role and I have something called as what? Specified access. I don't have complete access. But if I go back to my administrator account, if I go into the subscriptions, like this is a parent resource, this is what? Owner. That's the reason I was able to add the user. Now let me come back as a user. This is a contributor right now. I will try to add a user here. Though I don't have a role, I'll try to do that. So I'll again go to identity and access management. I'll say add. Do you see this? Add role assignment is disabled. Azure will not let you, let's say, add resources if you do not have a proper role. So this is what we are talking about, is that how do you get a role assignment out here? So you'll have to firstly add a user, let's say at the tenant level, and then go ahead and then give a role assignment to the user at the subscription level. This is how you go ahead and do role assignments as such. But the question can be that, you know what, I have 10,000 of users. Do I have to do everything? Meaning do I have to go ahead to each and every user and do this? No. There is also a bulk import operation. So if I go into, let's say, my Active Directory, I'll go into the users out here. There are bulk operations wherein I'll say bulk create, bulk invite, bulk delete, download users and all these things. If I say bulk create, Azure will tell me that, you know what, download the CSV file. It'll give you a user create template.csv. I'll just ask you to fill up this particular file, where it'll tell you what is the name, what do you want to do, what are the roles that you want to assign. And once you have all the users, let's say, created out here, you can re-upload this file here and the users will be created automatically. So you don't have to, or we don't really do, go to each and every user and then add them. If that, I mean, on the Excel. Mhm. On the Excel you're talking about? On the Excel, again, I can programmatically using a script, I can fill up that particular Excel sheet. So again, yes, if you want to do it manually, yes, it will take some time to do it manually. But if you want to programmatically also approach it, it is available. Meaning Azure exposes itself not only using the portal. Azure has something called as a REST API in the backend. So Azure exposes something called as a REST API so that you can programmatically interact with Azure without even having to log into the portal. So programmatically using PowerShell, ARM templates, Terraform scripting, REST API calls and all these things out. So we'll look at all those things, but you can programmatically interact with not only with Azure, you can also do the same thing with AWS, GCP and everything. That's the main thing of a cloud as such. So just to recap what we have done. So let's do that. So we said that tenant subscription and all these things, yes. Now we are talking about something called RBACs. And we are telling that there are three different types of roles that are available out there called owner, contributor, and a reader. And then we went ahead and added a user firstly, or I wouldn't say added, I would say invited a user. It's a user user invitation that was kind of sent across, and I invited this user to join my tenant. And after the user is invited, I went ahead and did a role assignment. And to do a role assignment, you at least need a role called owner. Without an owner role, you cannot do a role assignment out here. And then we are also talking about bulk operations. Because if you have so many people out here, then how do you go ahead and assign so many things out here? That using this bulk operation, you can get it done. You can also use programs in order to interact with Azure to add users and all these things out here. Any questions till here, guys? Anything that I can take till here? Oh, yes, you can also do a custom role, meaning these are all the roles that Azure offers to you. Let's say if I go into my subscription again, if I go into the identity and access management, I'll say add a role assignment. I have all these things. These are predefined by Azure. You can give a contributor to the custom. Yes, you can do a contributor to the custom role as well. Now, here's my question again is that I am coming back here into this particular portal. I'll say add a role. I'll do a role assignment. And this time around, I'll do a reader role assignment to the same user that I have assigned a contributor role to. I'm doing overlapping roles right now. Let's understand. The point here is that this is the user, right? And what is the role that I've assigned to this particular user? Contributor. I'm again going back into my portal as an administrator. I am assigning the same user as a reader. Let's go back. Let's say members, I'll select members and say contributor out here. I'll say review and assign. The same user now has two different permissions over the same subscription. One, initially I went ahead and said it's a contributor. Two, I am telling that the same user is also a reader. Now what's going to happen? Or what do you think should happen here? Should the user be a contributor or should the user be a reader? Access for the both. He's already a reader, yes. Sorry?
Access for both.
Access for both. But should the user not be a reader right now because I'm now limiting his permission? It's a redundant,
No,
exactly.
there is no limiting.
Reader role will be involved. That's right. The point that I want to highlight is that role assignment in Azure is additive in nature. What do I mean by that? Is that this user has a contributor and a reader. What does Azure do right now? Is that it tells you, okay, fine, contributor plus a reader, and always the role which has a higher order of precedence, or always the role which has a higher power will take the higher precedence. So contributor plus a reader will always be a contributor here. Because as a contributor, he can also read. He can also, let's say, do all these things out. Good, please. Uh, so the question here is that you have a user who's a contributor in Tata Steel. He can be assigned to a reader role in another subscription. Yes, he can. He can be. So the same user can, let's say, go across different subscriptions with different roles out there. Okay. This hierarchy will not be there because you're talking about two different subscriptions right now. So this hierarchy won't come into picture. If there are two different subscriptions, one subscription the user is a contributor, the other subscription the user only has a reader role. So you can only read that particular thing and etc. But if you go into that second subscription and you do a contributor, that will take a higher order of precedence. So it always depends upon what is, let's say, the hierarchy of a role, and always the higher role takes, let's say, the highest order of precedence as such in Azure. So the role assignment is always additive in nature. Okay. Any more questions here, guys? Go ahead, please. Hmm. Correct. Correct. Two owners is a possibility. Yes. Again, if you are an owner, you can delete me. You can go ahead and let's say happily delete me. Not a problem. But we generally don't do that. You have that power, but you generally don't do that as such, because everything that I do is again tracked in, let's say, the activity log. Everything is logged. Yeah. But yes, you can delete a user. You have a power to delete the other user as well as an owner. Now that's the very reason that I'm coming back to my first point, is that I don't want everyone to be an owner. Only a few people, only a group of people has to be, let's say, the owner. And that group of people can be, let's say, architects, can be, let's say, project administrators, and etc. Only they can be, let's say, the owners as such. Yes, any more questions here, guys? Yes, any questions, guys? Anyone till here? Yes, you have a question. So what do we do today is this one. Please go into this particular documentation, just say RBAC Azure. Just go through this documentation called what is role based access control, what do you get from this, and you also have a couple of videos out there explaining what is roles and all these things out. And just try to create a user, the way I was doing it. Just try to invite the user, see how the roles are, let's say, getting assigned, and we'll talk about user in, let's say, invitation, meaning creation of user in tomorrow's session as such. So we'll do user invitation and all these things, and tomorrow we'll start with the first resource of Azure called as a resource group. We'll talk about what is resources and we'll go from there. Okay. Any questions before I close, guys? Anyone? Any questions before I close?
How many access when current account is
I'm sorry. Can you come again, please? How many? How many
access
users that
as
you can add? Is that
no, 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 not sorry, it's contributor
okay?
adding. I have the subscription, but I add as a contributor. As contributor, how many members that I added as contributors?
How many members that you added as contributor? Not to know what are all the role assignments that are going in. You'll have to go here, come back again to identity and access management. Look at the role assignments out here. This will give you what is the role everyone has, what is, let's say, the permission they have. You can also go ahead and download all the role assignments out here. So this is how you know which role someone has, or what role someone has rather. Yes, only IAM. IAM is that particular control blade using which you can assign the role, not anything else as such. No limit. There's no limit as such. There's no limit on what are the number of roles that you can have per, let's say, an account as such. No limit as such. Is any more questions before I can close, guys? And tomorrow's session will start with subscriptions. We'll go ahead and understand what are all these blades in subscription, and then we'll start with something called as an Azure resource group. A resource group in Azure. Let's understand that and let's take it from there. Okay, guys. So that's it from my end. Thank you, and we'll meet tomorrow. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.